Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sustainable Ramona's series on sustainable buildings and homes. This is the second in a series, the first having been on water conservation, and the next one will be on transportation. Sustainable Ramona is a grassroots group working on the sustainability of our community. And tonight, we have with us Drew Hubbell. And Drew has a diverse background ranging from historic restoration to adaptive reuse of existing structures to custom residential design. His firm specializes in sustainable architecture, green building materials, and the use of alternative building materials such as straw bales, insulated concrete forms, adobe, and sprayed concrete construction. He leads the firm Hubbell Hubbell Architects and collaborates with his father, renowned artist James T. Hubbell, merging art and architecture in ecologically and aesthetically mindful ways. Welcome, Drew.
Thank you, Rob.
Take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for the group for inviting me to the symposium and to speak a little bit. I have a lot of interesting information to share with you on sustainability. It's been my passion since I was a little boy and since we started our firm about 25 years ago. So I thought I'd start out with a little bit of history because I grew up in the Julian area, so I know the East County very well. This image is a little blurred there, but it's the first straw bale we permitted about 22 years ago in Borrego Springs. And then my beginnings, that's my father, maybe when he was a young man. He just turned 90. But that's one of the structures up at the property in Julian. And the early structures, we tied rebar and then metal mesh between pipes and then sprayed concrete. So I'll show you some of those. And the property is called Elan Lael, meaning a tree belonging to God. This is a shot of the foundation property. After the cedar fires, the homes, 4 of the buildings were almost completely destroyed. And so this is an aerial view. You can see Volcan Mountain in the background and some of the new foundation buildings in the foreground. This is a shot of the main house after the cedar fire. You can see everything that was wood disappeared. That was the chimney and the fireplace in the living room. But they collected the stones. So they were early sustainable, practitioners building their own home. They used adobe block. You can see the adobe on the sidewalls. That all came from a mill in Escondido that we would pick up the broken blocks for free and haul them away. And then the stones you see around the walls and the columns were all collected from the property there. Here's a picture of the living room after the rebuild. And one of the sustainable features here, all of the cedar comes from trees that burned in the fires. So they were able to harvest those trees. They created a couple mills in Julian. So you can see the wood planks on the floor are cedar, the large timber planks on the roof, the beams, even the cabinetry is all cedar. So that's the house rebuilt after the cedar fire. Then a couple of the early buildings. The building in the background is called the studio. So my dad has had anywhere from 4 to 10 artisans working 3 days a week for him for about 60 years. And the neighbors called this the Bat Cave when I was growing up. So we were known as the Bat People for a while. And then in the foreground is a little archive, which is a gallery building. It's one of my favorite buildings. You can see the structural walls on both buildings are adobe block, but the roof on the gallery is made from traditional Spanish tile, but they're flipped upside down. Dad likes to try new ways of doing things. And then he had some specialty made tiles that are a little smaller as they create the flutes going up. never had to re-roof these buildings. The fires blew right over them, so they didn't damage these two. They really damaged the buildings that had more wood and were on the top of the hill. A couple of key green building concepts that I just wanted to touch on were site orientation. I know Rob touched on some of these on Monday night, but I'll just go through quickly. Site orientation allows you to think about passive heating and cooling, and building design. Better is usually, or smaller is usually better, and passive windows. The building on the left is in Hummel, Rancho Hummel Estates. It's a straw bale structure, and it was a passive solar design. So that overhang on the left is about a 4 foot wide. And so this picture is taken in the winter when the sun penetrates into the building and passively heats. And they put in a large air conditioning system, but barely ever use it because the sun helps heat the building, and the thermal mass and the insulation of the straw bales help insulate it. And then materials are always good to use recycled or salvaged or reclaimed materials, and with low off-gassing and durable materials. So this is a little passive solar orientation diagram. It talks about the winter sun being lower, so you let that in, and then the summer sun is higher if it's oriented correctly, so no sun penetrates, and it's mostly blocked or controlled by the roof structure and the overhangs. And as we go along, feel free to let me know if you have questions. Happy to answer anything as we go along. I recognize a lot of you on the screen. One of our more interesting projects was after the Witch Creek fire, which burned up in San Pasqual area. The San Pasqual tribe asked us to design a cultural center for them. So taking the passive solar concept a little further, they wanted to orient it so it's completely oriented directly to the direct north. So on the solstice, they would have the north coming through a circular skylight, and that would hit the chimney. So that was a teaching lesson that they can bring their youth in and teach them about the cycle of the sun and the orientation to that. But this overlooks Lake Wolford, very interesting design, and use the insulated concrete form walls for the structure. And then building design, I'll get into a few descriptions and projects of that. This is another picture of that passive solar home in Hummel. And just a little detail, this isn't a downspout on the bale wall, but it's some blue glass tile that just gives it a little bit of interest on those long west-facing walls that we didn't have any windows. And then the idea of learning from nature. The building on the right is a high-rise in Harare, Zimbabwe. And the architect used the concept of biomimicry, and following how the termites use their towers as a passive cooling. So the air pulls down from these tubes on the roof, and this building uses less than 10% of the conventional building. So no air conditioning is needed, very little heating. So really interesting concept of biomimicry and drawing on the knowledge of nature and learning from those lessons. And then image about passive solar orientation. So you can see the WS is the winter sun. Talking about a little bit what I said of the sun penetrating if it's oriented correctly, and then super insulated envelopes and overhangs that are large enough that they block that sun from coming in the summertime when you don't really want it to heat the home. And then the idea of thermal mass. This is when you have a solid surface inside of an insulated shell, it helps mediate those temperature swings. So was the Dunham Kidwell house in Hamul. It's up near Rancho Hamul. And the interesting item on this is the cooling tower you'll see at the top. Looks sort of traditional with a Spanish tile roof, but underneath it was this 10-foot diameter boulder. So a giant granite boulder that they really wanted to integrate into the center of the building. And this provides a wonderful thermal mass because it keeps the temperature of that rock about 65 to 66 degrees all year round because it's connected to the earth. So you can see on the right-hand side, we try to use bamboo flooring, and it's a straw bale structure. It was one of the first ones we did large workshops, bale raising workshops for. And then the cooling tower works above. It has a large fan. So in the summertime, we reverse it and the heat is drawn up and naturally cools the building. This is a tradition from the Middle East. They did this a lot in the early buildings. And in the winter, they close those windows in the tower and it recirculates down over the boulder and helps bring the warm air down in. And then the idea of earth and plaster, a number of our straw bale structures, we use a clay mixed with straw and sometimes horse manure because they've finally ground the straw up. You can see the beautiful texture, and then we'll often do a lime wash or a color coat over the top of this. And this was Bob Bowles. I think he lived in Ramona for a while. He was a straw bale enthusiast and builder on the right picture. And then I understand you had a series on water conservation, but this is just the idea of rainwater cisterns and catching that rainwater when we do have it, which is not very much anymore here. And then using that, I installed a 1,100 square foot one in my house in Kensington. And if we get 2 inches of rain, it fills it up completely in one downpour. So it's a pretty great. And then I use it on a few trees, during the dry months. And then gray water system, using that water. This system has a couple of different tubes going to different trees so they can circulate that. You can also just have it passively run through the different areas of your yard, but a great way because people are always using laundry. So if you use the right detergents, it's a great way for reusing that water. And then a couple of interesting tanks. Let's say on the right is a deck where they use these rainwater, they're called hogs, H-O-G. So they're flat tanks, and each one, I think it's 1,000 gallons, or it might be 500. But they can be lined up in sequence. And so the one on the left is behind a fence, so they put it up vertically. So the gutters can drain into the one on the left and then they'll fill up sequentially, or they can be in a deck. So interesting ways to use rainwater if you don't have an area for a big tank. And then alternative materials. Another interesting project we did in Tecate, Mexico for the foundation at, it's called Las Piedras. Wanted a nature center, which was 3 different buildings that looked like boulders. So this one was built with labor from Mexico, and we just taught them how to build the structures. And then we had somebody from the zoo come and make it look like the boulders. You can see some of Dad's stained glass windows in the glass portions of the clear story. And the children love to come and learn about nature. This was done through Rancho La Puerta and their foundation, and Olivia Seke. So one of the fun buildings is a little meeting room that has audio visual. So they go through these tunnels and the kids can climb. And then a local artisan made snake benches. But under the benches, we have a cooling tubes. And I think Rob said he mentioned this in his presentation, but the cooling tubes travel under the ground and passively cool the air. And then we have a high window or a vent up high. So there's no air conditioning or ventilation, but that helps pull that cool air in the summer times through the structure. And this rammed earth construction, one of my favorite, we haven't designed a rammed earth structure yet, but this one was done in Borrego at the same time as our first straw bale about 22 years ago. Beautiful structure. It's a little more cost because of the form and the labor work. But if you can see a little bit, they were able to create this strata in the rammed earth. And you can put different colors. So when you're inside, it feels like you're somewhere in a cave, and it's a wonderful passive and natural building. And then the metal roof we often use helps for rainwater and also reflective for less heat gain. These are a couple other rammed earth structures. We did not design them. The one on the left is in Africa. That one's been around for hundreds of years, and they come back and refinish the structure every year, people from the neighborhood. And the other one is a rammed earth in Napa Valley. Sorry for the sirens, they're going by us. This David Easton, he's an expert in rammed earth, and he's written a couple books on it. But you can see the beautiful columns with a concrete cap, and the walls are also rammed earth. And then we were able to permit this adobe structure as a freelinger. It's in Ramona over near Wildcat Canyon. This is fired adobe. So it's the first adobe that I'm aware of that's been permitted in about 20 years when the codes changed. It has a 2-inch thick concrete and rebar core between the two adobe blocks, which gives it the lateral strength that the building department needed. And it's a 2-story structure. He wanted sort of a hacienda feel with lots of overhangs to protect from the sun, and came out very nice. And we were happy to, bring that tradition back. And all the adobe are fired into Cadi and brought across the border. Those are some of those fired adobe blocks early on, and you can see the blocks going up. So it's more labor intensive than straw bales, which are a large module, but a very local sourced natural material. This was a fun adobe project. It was a fire rebuild out in Descanso on the backside of Cuyamaca Mountain. On the left, it's called Rancho Alegria. It was a large parcel, an old ranchero. So a couple of the buildings were old adobe. So everything, again, like my parents' property, everything that was wood was destroyed, but it actually fired the adobe harder, and the stone was fine. So the building on the left, or the wall that's left, is the chimney and the fireplace. And then the right side, you can see it's all cleaned up, and we restructured the adobe and put in doors and windows, and it turned out really nicely. And then we did create a couple of truth windows. So if people didn't believe it was adobe, you can see on the left side, there's a couple of sections of wall. And behind the medicine cabinets, they left the walls adobe block. And we used kind of Spanish tile design on that project. And then straw bale, we've designed over 35 straw bale structures all over the Southern California. This one is Smoke Tree Ranch. It was designed for a pretty wealthy client. It's about 7,000 square feet out near the airfield east of Borrego. This is a night shot, south facing, and it's on the airstrip. There's 2 wings, beautiful pool. And we're able to use all reclaimed heavy timbers and wood for all the wood structure you see exposed there. Those came from Seattle, an old barn they shipped down and remilled those. And there's a shot of the north face, also natural or wood, reclaimed wood. And in the foreground, the owner actually wanted to create a racing track for Ferraris. So he has an underground garage, but in the foreground, there's these interesting walls which create a little light well, which goes down into the garage. And then some of my dad's beautiful stained glass doors. So those are copper on the base and then stained glass inlaid in those entry doors. And there's a picture, not of the light well, but we did a glass bottom fountain up above. So when you enter into this sort of bat cave, which is the underground garage, there's this dancing light from the reflection of the water, and it's really a magical space. And the other thing, the temperature of this room stays in the mid 60s, so they can open the doors and draw that cool air up through the high windows, and it passively heats the home above. So not for everybody, but very fun when the client has money to play with those things. And then these are a couple of the architectural details, sort of fluting on the left side of the straw bale as it goes up to the reclaimed timbers, and a little stained glass light and wrought iron from my dad's studio. And then a picture of the kitchen and some of the reclaimed timber for the cabinets and the beams. And then there's a finished picture of the kitchen. This home, I think Casa del Zorro bought it for a while. They were going to turn it into resort living, and then they went bankrupt, so another client bought it more recently. Another fun project we did about 3 years ago for the Deer Park Monastery, which is just north of Escondido, near Daly Ranch. They interviewed us and hired us to design nuns' housing for them. So these are some construction shots of the bales going into place. You can see we have scaffolding, and there's a wood frame around the doors and windows, which is called a window buck. There's a metal X frame that creates the lateral support. And this is a floor plan of the 3 different buildings. They were interested in small rooms that 2 or 3 nuns could share, and then common showers and bathing, and then a covered walkway. And there's a beautiful courtyard. And then their founder, Thich Nhat Hanh, he's a famous Buddhist author and practitioner. This was his little building when he comes, where he would stay. And then one of the real fun things about straw bale construction is the bale raising. So I related to Amish barn raising, where a bunch of people come together and help put up the bale walls, and then they take authorship for the bales. This is rice straw that we ship down from Northern California, because the Buddhists eat a lot of rice, and they feel the connection to the rice straw, but a lot of it comes from Brawley and the inland, just down in the valley. You can see different people. The bale on the right side is notched, so that'll fit near one of the posts. And then the people are moving the bales around. They're about 55 pounds each, and then put them into place. And here's a picture of a couple of the nuns carrying one of the bales. They're in their robes, and then they're taking them through one of the and putting them into place. Then we come back and plaster the walls. And they, again, super insulated. They were very cold in little insulated shacks previously, and they use very little heating or cooling as necessary. And here's a couple of finished pictures of the courtyard on the upper right, and the left, the covered walkway. On the bottom left is Thich Nhat Hanh's room, which they use for meditation on these little mats. And then a picture of his little structure, also with the covered walkway in the foreground. About 15 years ago, we designed the first straw bale in the city of San Diego. This is the Friends Center. It's a Quaker meeting hall in the center structure, and then the Friends Meeting Hall and the Friends Service Committee. So there's two wings that are both peace groups that share the wings. And they built this whole structure with volunteer labor. One of the contractors or retired people that volunteered, he said he screwed because he screwed 100,000 screws putting together all the metal framing for this structure. This is a list of some of the green elements: straw bale, envelope, super insulated, recycled cellulose. They didn't want to use any lumber, so they used recycled steel, lightweight steel. It's passive solar. It has water and PVs on the roof, and they also rainwater catch for their gardens. So this is a picture during construction. You can see the metal frame. They were very strong. This is the only metal frame we've done, but they didn't want to use any lumber, just the people that are involved. And there's a picture of the finished product and the little courtyard where they gathered before their Sunday meetings and then go inside. Also passive solar. This is south facing. And then my father did a little peace crane sculpture in the foreground because they have a tradition of folding peace cranes with students and then sending them to Japan. The Peace Resource Center does. This is a close-up picture of earth and plaster with Simple Construct. They're one of the wonderful straw bale builders and earth and plaster specialists in San Diego County. You can see the texture, and that's a lime finish, and you can color the lime different colors. And then a couple of projects that are net zero, meaning the building and mostly the PVs, the photovoltaics, create as much energy as needed for the home as is used by the home. And this is a little detailed picture of a carved fountain, or a fountain in the foreground, and a little carved sculpture out on Coronado near their recreation building that my father designed. So if you're out in that area, go visit it. It's just a beautiful location and a nice fountain. Another interesting wall panel system we use sometimes is tri-D panels. And this home is called Magnificent Obsession. It's up in Fallbrook. You can see their photovoltaic system creating their power on the right side. The wife is Japanese, so this side feels a little bit like a Japanese tea house. This is south facing. And then the other side, well, these are some of the panels. They're 4 inches of styrofoam with a wire mesh inside and out, and then they're wired together. They come in sheets about 12 feet long by 4 feet. So if it's a square building or straight walls, it goes up very quickly. But if you create domes like we did in this design, it's not as quick. But these are the domes. The husband wanted sort of an adobe domed feel. So the north side, we used these tri-D panels and then plastered them. And that's an image. Well, the walls, you use the tri-D, and the domes, and then it's wood framed in between. And this client are organic exotic gardeners. So they have about 2 acres of all organic vegetables and fruits. Another interesting project or building material we've only used a couple of times is autoclave aerated concrete. So the concrete is mixed with a zinc, and it's superheated. So the concrete itself has all these little air pockets. It makes it very brittle, but put together with the rebar, and you can see the core uses a lot less cement than the other blocks we use. This one was done in Bend, Oregon. Again, super insulating, wonderful thermal mass, but hasn't become as popular. And the only place that we know that makes it is in Texas. So there's issues with shipping and, the cost of doing that. But one of the fun things, she had junipers on her property in Bend. And so these are some of the juniper trees that they debarked and sandblasted, and we were able to use for the structural columns. They're almost like they're carved. They're really beautiful. And then they also have a lot of lava rock. So we integrated the lava rock, which you can see at the bottom. And then there's a couple of the finished pictures of the house, and a sort of a pool house on the right side. All native landscapes she used around the buildings. And then this is the Anders residence. It is stick frame. He's an energy professor at USD, and started out wanting to do straw bale. Determined it was going to cost a little bit more, so we went with 2x6 construction on this building. It has a central courtyard facing south, a couple of wings, high great room in the background, so high windows creating that cooling tower effect. And this one you can see the solar and the hot water panels, and because of the orientation and the super insulating, this one also uses very little heating or cooling, and it has a beautiful rooftop deck. This one is off of Wildcat Canyon, just as you're coming up, and was another fire rebuild, I think, after the Witch Creek fire. And then one of the materials that we're using a lot right now is called insulated composite concrete forms. So these are forms that use recycled styrofoam, which is made and these ones are made in Arizona. So they use the shipping foam from Sony. When they ship elements over, they recycle it, mix it with cement, and make these large blocks. So this was a rebuild, again, from a fire. Had to use the footprint of an early shed because it's in the watershed of the Escondido Creek, and is now an interpretive center. The image on the top is the block laid in a circular pattern during construction, and then it has a living roof because of the proximity to the creek. The living roof helps filter the water, so it limits the amount of contaminants running into the creek. And that one, you can see on the bottom, very high risk of fires also here, and flooding. So we designed it with the block because even if it flooded and the windows and doors were blown out, the block will survive, no problem. And then it has roll down shutters. I know Bob McComb is on the call here. He also used roll down shutters, which has a fusible link on his house in Ramona. If it gets too hot, those automatically roll down and protect the windows, which are a weak link in fires. This is a detail of the ICF block. So it has these little cells, which are filled with, they're 6-inch shells filled with rebar and concrete, and then the blocks are laid on edge or laid on side, vertically or horizontally. And then there's a finished picture of the Elfin Forest Interpretive Center. If you haven't been there, there's some beautiful art by other artists inside. The little column was carved by my dad. It's a cloud pattern, and passive solar grapes on the south-facing trellis, so help keep shaded in the summertime. You can see it's sitting on the rocking chair there. And in the wintertime, the grapes are deciduous, so they let the sun penetrate into the building. And all natural stones. So we try to use natural materials from the site or nearby as much as possible. a couple of other ICF projects. This one, I'm just going to show you an image of a few to show you it can be used in a more modern contemporary building. This client wanted to do everything she could green, and she created a green website, and this was a platinum LEED certified building. And one of the interesting features of this, besides the ICF, is we used a ground source heat pump. So they drilled a well because they have organic gardens, but they drilled a second hole about 200 feet and used the natural coolness of the earth to heat their pool and also their mechanical systems using that ground source heat pump. So it's a technology that often is used in Europe in colder climates, but instead of heating the pool, which they want to use year round with propane or natural gas, they can use that ground source. And another interesting project, this one is in East Poway, another fire rebuild on the site of an earlier home. And ICF block, more of a traditional Spanish building with sort of a built-in garage on the lower level, and then a winged structures with traditional clay tile. And this is on the bottom is the sort of the west facing. We needed to use the footprint of the original building for the building department to avoid any fees for the rebuild. So we used the outline, but rebuilt with covered patios protecting it for the passive solar elements. And then I'm going to finish with a few slides of the Ilan Leal Foundation. After the Cedar fires, my parents didn't have fire insurance because their building was very unique and sort of nestled in the trees, if any of you have been there before. So they turned the foundation or the buildings over to our foundation. We're able to raise money through donations to rebuild the main homes, which were damaged. About 4 of the 10 structures were damaged pretty badly. But the new buildings we've created in the last 5 years are now built by the foundation through grants and donations. So these buildings, which you see, are all the roof dome structures are the tri-D panels bent into arches and domes. And then the wall system is all the ICF block. You can see there's a beautiful little stair, and that's Volcan Mountain in the background. And then there's an indoor-outdoor fireplace in the foreground and a little amphitheater with stairs. So we have Spencer Valley School, which used to be a one-room school I attended when I was a kid. They come and sometimes will do their theater and productions up in this little outdoor amphitheater. This is a fun little site plan of the property. If you haven't been there, I invite you all. We have tours in the fall and the spring, and also are using the new center for retreats and workshops, art workshops. But the original building is here in the center. That one is the one I showed at the beginning, which was damaged by the fires. There's a swimming pool. The boys' house is a very organic, fun structure. And then there's studios and some sculptural archives. And the gardens are an integral part of the property as well. So one of the philosophy of my parents building sustainable is they never wanted to borrow from a bank. So they built each structure individually as they had the money by their own hands and with some labor and were inexpensive labor building growing up. They were able to build, and it also allowed my dad to change the style of the buildings as he grew and developed, wanted to experiment with different elements. So these are a few construction shots showing the archive or the new Ilan Leal Center. So you can see the tri-D panels. before they're plastered and sealed. And you can see the walls are the ICF block. And then there's a picture facing to the east, reclaimed, so the plaster, that's the roof deck up on top, and reclaimed cedar beams and some copper waterproofing flashing up above. There's a little detail of the framing and how that arch connects to a large beam, and then the flat ceiling traditional framing of the structure below. And then that's the large studio I showed early on. They do have workshops. We have a full blacksmith and forge, John Wheelock, who lives down in the Ramona area. He's been working for Dad over 25 years, creating beautiful wrought iron pieces. And then there's a stained glass studio. The little image on the right is one of his sculptural stained glass pieces. And then there's a Kiva gallery with a closer up of the roof that is one of my favorites. It's been there for over 30 years and they've never had to re-roof or touch that tile, so it works very well. These upper right are some stairs going down into the Kiva, and then you can see some of the wrought iron work for decorative hinges, and then my dad's little sketch of the Kiva building on the bottom left.
Oh, man.
And then a couple of pictures. This is the Boyce House. To finish up, this building survived the fires. It came over the hill from the west. But the interesting thing, it was so hot, the stained glass in the over the bathroom, which you can see on the top left, it's a stained glass ceiling, melted the lead and it collapsed. So that's a rebuild of the original. But the rest of the house survived, and my parents were able to cover the bathroom up and move back into that building as they rebuilt the structure about 18 years ago. And that's a couple of pictures, details around the property. The lower one is the Boyce House, again, adobe and spray concrete, very free form. The picture on the right is my dad's personal studio that they rebuilt and added some tile, and then the rebuilt kitchen on the upper left with some mosaics, colored mosaics. And then that's a close-up of the Elon Leo Center. The building on the left behind me and behind the fireplaces is the meeting hall. We have video conferences, and it can hold up to 25 people. And then the courtyard, and then there's an office with a full kitchen, and then an aerial view from above showing that central courtyard and the rooftop deck. So I believe the slides are going to be saved, and they'll have a link for you, so you can come back if you're interested. And these are just some of the resources that I used for some of the information in the talk. And then this is my final slide. It's one of my favorite images. It's a little guest house on Mount Soledad in La Jolla that my dad designed a while back. And it's a freeform structure. And this is an image taken of the stained glass clear story at night. It's backlit, and the stained glass washes down onto the dome and creates this beautiful imagery. It feels to me like you're underwater. So that's kind of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions, or if there aren't any, that's fine too. But I enjoy being here and sharing a little bit of our work with all of you.
Thank you very much, Drew. That was wonderful. Do folks have?
I have a question.
Hi, Simone.
Hi, when is the next tour, or can you just go out there on your own and visit Ilan Leal?
You cannot. We have tours. I think they're done for the season because it gets pretty cold in the winter. But if you go to the Elan Leal website, just search that, you'll see all kinds of workshops. There's still a few workshops coming up. We have stained glass and dyeing, natural dyeing, and basket weaving and mosaic tile. So that's a wonderful way to visit because it's a small group. But the open houses we used to have on Father's Day, we would have 600 to 800 people on a day.
Oh,
So it
wow.
wasn't a great experience. Well, it was a nice experience, but it was a crowd. But now the open houses are much smaller. You drive right and park on the property, and it's 25 to 30 people maximum. So they're great. And the other option is to you can rent the space for a workshop or retreat or other things like that. So all that information is on the Elan Leal website.
Thanks.
I'd like to
Yes.
mention, I did earlier, but I was up about 2 weeks ago and it's well worth it. It's just a wonderful tour.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Drew, I'd like to make a comment. Your presentation is just a beautiful example of the integration of art and architecture and the use of nature in all of your designs. It's so, I don't know, it just makes you feel so different than a normal house. And you've helped us live that way with the design of our house too. And when you were working, designing our house and we were building it, we lived down in Point Loma for some years and we were able to walk along Shelter Island. And I think both of those structures, one on each end of Shelter Island, were your dad's work. Is that true?
Yes, thank you, Bob. And it's so great to see you. It's been a while and we really enjoyed working with you a while back. But there is my dad's and the foundation have designed 8 different peace parks around the Pacific Rim in different countries. And you can also find information on those on the Elan Leal website. But there's a San Diego Peace Park, which is out at the tip of Shelter Island. And it's the furthest point facing out towards the harbor entrance. And then about 6 years ago, we designed a little portico rebuilding for the port of Pacific, the port, and that's right across from Humphreys by the bay. So if you get out there, those are 2 fun little structures. They're public, they're open to the public. Great place to have a picnic or just go for a walk. But thank you for mentioning those, Bob.
Yeah, we always enjoyed taking friends and walking along Shelter Island and mentioning that we had an architect who was so famous that his work was out on the harbor.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Can I finish then with a little writing from my father?
Absolutely.
It's kind of a poem, but it's longer than a poem. So it's called The Architecture of Jubilation, and it sort of encapsulates his and my philosophy about building. So the architecture of jubilation. It is my belief that we are passing through a gate from one age to another, perhaps more profound than the changes medieval man faced with the rising of humanism in the age we call the Renaissance. We have spent the last 500 years trying to understand the world by dividing it into parts. We are now at the task of putting our world back together. We are seeking a vision of a whole world with ourselves as part of the whole. It is my belief, have you ever watched the millions of stars in the sky on a moonless night, or seen the wind wave over a field of grass, or noticed the dust at play on a shaft of light, or felt the warmth of another's hand, someone you cared for? This is where architecture must come from. Architecture must take measure of all that is human in the world that is whole. It must take count of our galaxy and of a smile, and somehow learn to interpret and express our whole new world in walls, doors, and roofs. It is not that economics or function are not important. but they no longer express the whole man. They no longer express who we believe ourselves to be. We must add our love, our history, our metaphysics. We must add the wind, the sun, and the call of the hills. Our buildings must learn to express all that we contained, for now we are a whole world. I have heard astronomers talk of the music of the spheres. I have heard this music described as a song of jubilation. Perhaps this is a word of our coming age, a time of coming together, a coming back to the whole. We need an architecture of jubilation to sing of it. James Hubbell.
Wow. Can we get a copy of that?
Yes, I believe it's on the Elan Leal website as well.
Okay.
So if you search there, Simone, if you can't find it, email me and I will send it to you.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful, Drew, and I think it's so appropriate to our time now in history. I'm not sure how recently you and he wrote it, but I'm surely hoping that the kind of work that you people have done over the years will sort of ring true, and people in our own country will come together politically and otherwise. And that it's so important that we do that right now in this world that we're living in, because we've got to come together. It's absolutely of the essence that we come together. And through art and architecture, you're doing that. You're helping us do that. So thank you so much for what you guys have done over the years.
Thank you, Bob. I totally agree with what you're saying. I think your small group in Ramona is doing the same thing, bringing people and teaching them some of these lessons of sustainability. So thank you all that were involved putting this together.
I wish to say hoorah.
I want to thank you too, this is Larry Barnes, for all the artwork and also the movement of like all the earth and things. Those are really interesting and a great part of building new things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. So I guess if everybody's fine, we can sign off and you can go enjoy dinner or your evening.
Drew, we'd really like to show our appreciation to
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight with us.
You're welcome.
And everyone can check the Sustainable Ramona website for some of our various series of symposiums, and we've got another one coming up on transportation in February. But I have to say, I think this is my favorite so far. So Drew, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.